Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick, and we're back for part two of the discussion of the defense versus the Vikings in that Week 10 win. Ravens are now 4-5. They've won 3 in a row. They're within one game of the Steelers. Great pleasure, by the way, to go to Minnesota. I mean, it's not the greatest vacation-y spot to go to, but we found a really nice restaurant, had great pizza. We enjoyed our time there with other Ravens fans, and did experience some legitimate cold there for the first time this year. I mean, obviously it's been a little bit cooler in Baltimore, but it hasn't gotten super cold even overnight. And, it was down in the 20s during the day in Minnesota, or at least it certainly felt that way. We saw our first snow of the year there. So anyway, the indoor stadium was a delight, which is unlike the previous trip to Minnesota, which I think was a little earlier in the year in 2017. And one of the things that I really don't like about the stadium design there is that they have a lot of glass around, and it creates a very high, intense light that is very bothersome to people who have any photosensitivity. So if you're one of those people, you would probably really will not like it. If you sometimes tend to get a headache because light is coming through you in a car and you don't have like good window tinting or something like that, you probably really would not like that stadium. One change I saw they had made since the last time we was there is they put up some additional, I don't know what it was, cloth or something on the inside of the glass on the top side. Probably reduces heat on the inside, but it also probably reduces light. So I think that was a good change from our previous visit there. Anyway, the stadium itself is very nice. The seating is nice. The sight lines are good, at least from where we sat. And really enjoyed, obviously, the football game in terms of a Ravens win. We got to enjoy the trip back to Baltimore. And on the flight on Delta, you could actually watch the Steelers and Packers game. And literally the entire plane was watching it together and cheering. It's almost like you were at a bar watching a Ravens watch party. It was that kind of pleasant. And we've all got headsets in. You can hear a roar go up with any turnover or stop on downs or whatever it was for the defense for the Chargers in that game. Anyway, good stuff. And we're going to talk about some more things from the game. I want to talk about some of the individual player performances in this second part of the show. I want to get to some mailbag questions. I'll give you my MVPs for the game, and we'll probably talk about a couple other things and all. But I do want to also point you back to the first episode. If you missed it, went into some gruesome detail on the 8 false starts, which I think are the biggest single story from this game, and whether or not the Ravens coaches, and this is certainly a characteristic of Harbaugh over the years, have found something in terms of the ability to induce false starts. Because the Minnesota Vikings had 8 false starts at home. That would never normally happen. They mentioned during the broadcast the last time they'd had as many false starts, they were playing at Chicago in 2006. Of course, Chicago was a Super Bowl team that year, and they had raucous crowds there that would have been creating tons of noise and making it difficult on the Vikings offense. That wasn't the case here. It was quiet as heck, and they had 8 false starts, and the Ravens may have had some clever techniques to improve their chances of getting a false start. Although I'll say a lot of this is lost. A lot of the 8 false starts and the damning consistency of them is lost in a number of mistakes the Vikings are making on them. So it wasn't any one position. It wasn't always the right tackle. The right tackle did have 3 of them, but it was 5 other positions had them too, including a quarterback, a wide receiver, a tight end, the left tackle, and the center of all people. The center, got confused, I think, by having Hamilton line up over. But anyway, there's a lot of information there. I'd encourage you to listen to it. Some of the reasons why that a flag might be called on the defense in such situations for delay of game, and tell me what you think. Hit me up with either a DM or a response on Twitter to whether or not you think the false starts were truly something the Ravens were inducing effectively, or more a function of the Vikings being not particularly good at dealing with their cadence. It's interesting. The head coach of the Vikings addressed it, had multiple questions about it during his interview after the game. And he said, we tried other things. I talked to my players. I tried to see if the Ravens were saying anything that were messing with the cadence. And he said there wasn't any evidence that they were doing that. So we've got to get this cleaned up. I'm not sure he completely buys into what he's saying. I'm not sure he's completely revealing what his feelings are about it. I think I would not be surprised if the Vikings send video to the league and they complain about specific things that the players say the Ravens were doing. So we may see something come of that or not. I don't think fines will come or anything, but the potential is that a rules change would come next year. Harbaugh is on the competition committee, which has always served the Ravens very well. And in fact, by the way, the AFC North has 3 representatives on the competition committee, which doesn't have all that many total representatives. But the Bengals needed to have someone because the Ravens and Steelers both had someone. The Browns don't have anyone. But it's interesting that it should be so packed with AFC North people. But Tomlin and Harbaugh are 2 longtime coaches who both understand the need to understand the rules well and take advantage of them as best you can. So this is a good game for Harbaugh, by the way. In a lot of ways, the clock management was very good, and the 8 false starts are a thing of beauty. If he had any hand in orchestrating this, I'll just say that. All right, so let's talk about some of the individual performances in this game. So some very fine performances. In a lot of ways, this defense continues to evolve, with this week the biggest change being the addition of Draymond Jones, which had a lot of ripples of impact through this game. And I think that we'll start with him, that by adding Draymond Jones, 2 major things occurred. The first was that Mike Green played a few less snaps and a few less percentage of snaps. It wasn't really even that much, but Mike Green was still very effective and rested enough to tee off on the last series of the game when he had some of his best pass rush results. And in particular, he spent 10 seconds chasing after McCarthy to get that final quarterback hit on what became the incomplete that sealed the game, with only a 3-man pass rush. So McCarthy, needless to say, had ample time and space. Green chased him all around. He got block, and he still had unbelievable energy to maintain that rush, largely because there's no additional play to look forward to in that game if you're Mike Green. If you can make this work, the game is over. And sure enough, he finally got to McCarthy and took him down as McCarthy threw the ball underthrown to the left side for Jones, which went incomplete. So the fact that Draymond Jones was around and made it easier for Mike Green to play a few less snaps and have a few less run responsibilities. The Vikings also helped out with that, by the way, because the Vikings didn't run the ball a whole lot in this game. That combination of factors really made Mike Green, I believe, more effective. And I think more reduction of snaps would make him even more effective. And I think the Ravens ought to try and find a way to do that. And they probably are getting very close to having the means to do so. The other thing that the Draymond Jones activation did, in addition, we'll get to zone play in just a second, but was it reduced the play of David Ojabo dramatically from 35 snaps against the Dolphins, 10 this week against Minnesota. That's a big addition by subtraction. And I don't want to beat on David Ojabo, but he's far down the totem pole in quality of play among Ravens outside linebackers, and anything they can do to have other players take his place is probably a good thing for the Baltimore Ravens. So I know people have strong feelings about Daniel Falele and others, but Ojabo's truly been awful, and it's at a point where it's possible that a cut will come. But I think that if the Ravens felt that Carl Lawson was really ready to go, they'd probably go with him. The problem is that Lawson is not really a guy who will help you out on first and second down. Ojabo is a guy, he won't necessarily help you out on first and second down, but he can be out there on first and second down and try and set the edge for you. I don't think it's anything he's been particularly successful at. Now, Draymond Jones is that. He's much more of a replacement for Tavius Robinson. And the big thing we saw from Draymond in this game was versatility. So he played inside, he played outside. He didn't play a lot of run defense, by the way. I mean, I'd say his run defense right now is untested. He had, I think, 4 run snaps and 35 pass snaps he played. And 34 of those 35, he rushed the passer where he was effective. So that was nice to see. But he didn't do much in terms of showing off what his run defense was, because the Vikings just didn't run the ball all that much the whole game. So that was certainly something they didn't absolutely need him for. But he provides a very big missing piece on the inside of the obvious passing downs pass rush. So when the Ravens go to a dime defense and they want to put 2 interior pass rushers on the field. Travis Jones is one of them every single play. I mean, every single such play. But when they want a second, the most sensible one is Draymond Jones. They also use some of Taven Bryan in this game, and so he was a guy who helped the Ravens with some pass rush. I'll get to him in just a moment. But Draymond had a good game from a pressure standpoint. He had contributions to 5 events. He had a quarterback hit. He had a late quarterback hit, and I'm differentiating that because a late quarterback hit is coming after 3 seconds. So it would not have disrupted an ATS opportunity, say, but he got a quarterback hit anyway. He also had 2.5 pressures in the game. Had some nice compound events where he was helping either get there first to create an opportunity for a quarterback hit that came after that, or help phone booth the pocket on a multi-way pressure that created problems for McCarthy. But good combination pressures in this game. It looked like in a lot of ways we were looking at the 23 Ravens, and that pass rush in terms of its swarming voraciousness and ability to make the quarterback do stupid things. Some of that was McCarthy. He does plenty of stupid things on his own, I know. But anyway, Draymond Jones, a very good debut for the Ravens. I think that I think I pretty much hit on everything that he helped the Ravens on in a positive way. So a combination of versatility, getting some other players into a more advantageous snap role. And I would expect his role will stay pretty similar with the Ravens the rest of the year. He might even be a guy that the Ravens would look to re-sign. We'll see how effective he is in total. But this game, the first initial results were very good. And if you got this out of Draymond Jones every game, you'd be extremely happy. Let's move on to Taven Bryan, because I mentioned him already. I want to make sure I don't forget my comments about him. He was really focused on a pass rush role in this game. He's kind of too small to handle the run. So whenever they attempted to run the football, they kind of focused on him as the point of attack and would do a combination block to move him and create a lane. Even the solo blocks, he wasn't particularly good at getting off of those either. And so it went to the degree they did any zone running, and a lot of it was outside and gap. But to the degree they did zone running, they had good cutback opportunities in Bryan's position. So, he's a guy who showed up on a couple of our notes for the offensive wins that the Vikings had on run plays. Anything 6 or more yards, we go through what were the key blocks and kind of map out the point of attack there, so we know who was most responsible for that. And Taven Bryan's name came up a couple times during that. But he did much better on the pass rush role, where he delivered 3 different pressures. He had another quarterback hit that was negated by a DPI call. I think it was one on Roquan. A fine game, frankly. He was in there. I think right up to the last series. I'm going to look at this really quickly. Yeah, he played the 3rd and 11 play on the last series. The series before that, he played 4 snaps. It's not like the Ravens were taking him off the field or anything. And, they were somewhat effective with him on the field in terms of stopping passes. So good game from Taven in terms of what went on. He was on the field for 1 point and got a pressure that eventually became the sack by Travis Jones. So he was part of a 2-man pressure on that play. So good game from Bryan in some ways. Obviously, the run defense, he's not really meeting the Ravens standard for that, but that's a choice they make. If they had Aeneas Peebles out there, I don't think it'd be any different. I think he'd be a guy who would have struggled mightily on run plays on what might obviously be passing down. So if you want to run the ball on 2nd and 10 and Aeneas Peebles on the field, you'd have the same kind of issues as with Taven Bryan on the field. The Vikings faced a lot of such situations because of all their false start problems. So they faced a lot of 1st and 15s in this game. They might have had 1st and 15 4 or 5 times in this game. They had it. And some of those drives were stalled, which was nice, but it created multiple situations within that series where they were behind where they needed to be. That was something also O'Connell talked about is, he's very happy with the 6 yards per play, which is, it's good. It's not great, but it's 6 yards per play that the Vikings offense was generating. But he said, we're giving it all back in penalties that we didn't really have favorable down and distance situations, because even when we're gaining 6 yards of play, when we're giving back 5 yards at a pop on these false starts, we're losing. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he was very upset, needless to say, about those false starts. And I think he had a certain amount of fatigue by the end of that discussion in terms of the questions themselves. He probably got about 5 or 6 questions in total about false starts or cadence during his interview. And I'm thinking back, by the way, to the Ravens this summer, because the Ravens had a bunch of false starts, some in the preseason games, but they had a ton during their 11 on 11 drills during the preseason, and they installed complex cadences, and they had a big series of drills they ran every single day. What I call those set and snap drills, where they they go to the huddle, call a play, get it in, emphasize getting to the line of scrimmage quickly, getting in your position quickly, getting out of your stance quickly, running your motion, and doing it all with live cadence. But they don't even wear a helmet when they're running those drills. It's first drill of the day they would run every time, and when they're running it helmetless, they're not going for any contact, but the coaches still want to see the players quick out of their stances on those plays. So they're not, you can't tell players, okay, be good with your cadence, and then just give them nothing else to worry about. So if the players didn't have to get out of their stance quickly, it'd be like playing Simon Says, where you're allowed to wait like 5 seconds to think about whether Simon Says was said or not. And then I know there's probably a bunch of young people have no idea what that game is, but if you grew up in the 1970s, or if you grew up in the 1970s and watched the Superstars competition, you can still go out and look at those on YouTube. Probably you'll see there's a great guy who comes in and runs a Simon Says game that he plays with the athletes, and basically, once he picked on you and said, "Hey, come on up here," kind of thing, you were dead, because he was going to give you 10 things to go through, and then he was going to mess with you, and then he just wouldn't ever let up until he got you. But it's comedic. It's extremely funny. It's worth saying. But basically, you can't do anything until the person who's running the game says Simon Says. So Simon Says step back. Now Simon Says step forward. If Simon Says lift your arms up. Okay, put your hand on your head. And if you did it, then Simon didn't say so you lose. Anyway, enough description of that. But anyway, I forgot where I was in this whole discussion because of where we were here. But I think, well, that's embarrassing. Anyway, so go out and look at those old superstar competitions from the 1970s. They are funny anyway. So Taven Bryan, a decent game for him. Travis Jones, Ravens' most dominant defensive lineman in the game, had probably his best game ever as a Raven, although there's now a couple games that are close. The game last week against Miami being one of the primary competitors. He had 7 total contributions to 7 different pass rush events in the game. Sack -3, a quarterback hit / PD, a late PD, and 3 other solo pressures. So didn't even have any combined pressures in that group there. Just an outstanding game of impacting the cone. And what it looked like to me is Orr is trying to set up individual instances where he could get a one-on-one matchup for Jones by either using simulated pressure, and you show an extra guy mugging the A gap. The second blocker who would normally be assigned to Jones as the nose tackle has to instead worry first about the guy who's in the A gap. And that could be Roquan Smith. He could literally put his hands up on the center or left guard, let's say, push off him to drop back into coverage, and he'll disadvantage that player significantly in terms of any impact he can have on Travis Jones. Travis Jones proved much too much to handle for any of the 3 interior offensive linemen that the Vikings could play on him. Now, it's not really surprising that Jake Brandell, who's a backup center, the backup center to Ryan Kelly, wasn't really able to handle him. But their left guard is a highly touted rookie guard, Donovan Jackson, who is somebody who you would expect might have some success versus a player like Travis Jones, but no match at all for him. No match at all for him in one-on-one play. Will Fries was a guy they brought in as a free agent. Also didn't have any success really with anybody in the game, but he definitely didn't have any success with Travis Jones or Draymond in particular when he had to block him. So he was effective. He was ineffective versus each of the Jones. I do remember what the Simon Says was about now, because we're talking about the pre-snap, the set and snap drills they did. If it's not a game of Simon Says, if you don't force the players into a divided attention game where they have to think about both what they have to do, how quickly they have to do it, and also what the snap count is, then you're not really testing them in the way you would like. So They did a really good job, spent a lot of time doing that this summer. And I think the Ravens offense has gotten value out of it, but maybe even more so seeing a team like the Vikings struggle the way they did. The Ravens might have really avoided some difficulty. I think one of the things that's really nice, and O'Connell mentioned this in his interview as well, was that if you have just too simple a cadence, you allow the defense to just tee off on you. They know exactly when you're gonna call, and if you're going on one every time, then you're basically just setting the dogs loose after the quarterback, and they're out of sprinters blocks, as I sometimes refer to it. Well, they needed to avoid that, so they didn't quite simplify a cadence like that. But he said the more they tried to change it, the more the worse it got. So they said they need to fix that immediately, and that's fun. I wonder if he's really telling us though what the Vikings are going to do with the NFL in terms of sending in information. It's usually good not to tip your hand. It's exceptionally good not to intimate in any way that the officials missed some calls, because you get fined for that directly. But in this case, I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings said, "Hey, look, this isn't fair. The Ravens can't do this," and they told on us, to the league in that regard. All right, let's move on to Mike Green, who had just an outstanding game as I saw it. He made plays all over the place, and there's a few that I really want to point out that they were so special. They're great. So he had 3 quarterback hits. 2 of those were late quarterback hits, including that 10-second one on the very final play where it literally he had to go through multiple players that were blocking him. He didn't make progress initially, and then he got blocked crossing the pocket and then crossing back to go after McCarthy as he left it. And it was a long struggle, but he didn't give up on the play, and he ended up knocking McCarthy down as he threw an incomplete pass to win the football game. So that was all of that was well worth it in the end. But he had other plays too that were terrific. So he Euro stepped inside Brian O'Neill. Now Brian O'Neill's the right tackle for the Vikings, who had all the problems with false starts, and both of their offensive tackles, by the way, are terrific players. Both of them have been to the Pro Bowl, I believe. Brian O'Neill at right tackle and Christian Darrisaw at left tackle. A few years ago, the Ravens needed a left tackle. Vikings weren't playing so well at the trade deadline, and I was actually kind of hopeful that a player like O'Neill might have been available for trade, but the Vikings never considered, I don't think, trading him. But anyway, he obviously had some problems in this game. But the play I'm referring to, Green, faked an outside step, then moved inside, and the handoff, the play was so slow to develop that he was able to get in the backfield and tackle Jones for a loss of 5 on a play that was actually heading to the outside. So he could have gotten himself out of position, but he was so quick that he was able to still maintain the proper leverage on Jones and tackle him for a loss of 5. Outstanding play. The second one I want to mention might even be better. So Justin Jefferson was lined up in the backfield. Now, why would you do that? Well, typically you want to use some sort of motion or give Jefferson some sort of optioned release to leave the backfield and find space on the field. So what did he do? Well, he's on the left side of the formation in the backfield behind the quarterback, and he leaked out to Green's side. Green absolutely derailed his train, knocked him the way Lewis did to Hines Ward, or I think it's actually Jarrett Johnson to Hines Ward, and Ray Lewis to Chad Johnson. There's been multiple cases of this in Ravens history. This ought to go right down there at the top. So this is one of the best ever. Anyway, he knocks him sprawling backwards towards the sideline. Didn't go down. He didn't leave the game with a concussion or anything like that, but he went sprawling out of the play. So McCarthy now is looking around, can't find anybody to throw the ball to, and he decides to scramble and leave the pocket. Well, in the meantime, Green was blocked by the left tackle Darrisaw very effectively, but when McCarthy left the pocket, the tackle lost his advantage of positioning relative to McCarthy's position, and Green was off like a bolt, got him for a 3-yard run, tracked him down for a 3-yard run, made the tackle. So he made that play from start to finish in terms of taking Jefferson out of it and then tracking down McCarthy with lightning cat quickness after the play. One of the big reasons I'm just loving what Mike Green is doing on the football field right now. If you're not positive about Mike Green after this game, I don't know where you are, because he showed a lot of what we hoped for in terms of the players the player the Ravens drafted. All right, let's move on. Another rookie. So Teddy Buchanan tackled well again in this game. Had his best coverage game this game as a pro. 2 targets for 6 yards. He had half a pressure. He got in on a combined pressure in the backfield. Did a handful of things well. I think this was probably his best game as a Raven. There's some other games that are close, but if I had to pick one, I'd say this would be it. He didn't really get beaten between level 2 and level 3, which was one of the real big fears in this game, that any of the Vikings receiving assets would take advantage of him, and he just played a very solid game. He wasn't quite as good, maybe in one respect, as he was against Miami, where he made 2 tackles while turnovers were being generated by defensive backs. And I think it was Gilman one time and Humphrey the other that had forced fumbles while Buchanan was making a tackle. So not quite that impact on the game, but I think this was an outstanding game for Buchanan. And I mentioned in the first show, I'm very high on all 3 Ravens rookie defenders right now. You can add Keon Martin to that group too, because he had a great game. I'll talk about him a little later. But Buchanan, outstanding in this game, and probably better than he played on average during the month where he won Defensive Rookie of the Month. So that's always nice. Not a great game for Roquan Smith. 2 DPIs. One was really bad. I've never seen anybody so aggressively jack up a receiver as he did Jones on the left. I think it was Jones on the left sideline, where he literally threw him to the ground. It wasn't a matter of, just try to tug at him or grab his jersey or even just, slow him down. I mean, he just jacked him up and threw him down to the ground. And almost looked like the players had been trash talking each other or something. And if he was going to get his money's worth out of some retribution there, but it's almost surprising a personal foul wasn't called on the play. And Roquan was arguing about something after the play, and it might have been that Jones had done something to him that caused him to react in this way. And he's saying, well, this should be unsportsmanlike going both directions. Why am I the only one getting flagged for this? It may have been something like that. But anyway, I can't figure out otherwise what it might have been, because Smith's certainly very upset about the play after the fact. I thought it was an extremely poor call on the interception reversal. Extremely poor. It was a somewhat poor call on the interception reversal. Is not the kind of play that replay assist should have had a Supreme Court like ability to reverse. It's something that should have been looked at on review, and I don't think it would have been reversed if the officials had looked at it, as they used to. And it's I don't think there's probably enough indisputable evidence, and it looked to me like he controlled the football as the football was turning slightly on the ground. Yes, the tip of the football touched the ground, no doubt about it, and the football moved slightly, but it was still under his firm grasp. And Pereira, I believe, was the rules expert they had on for the broadcast. He thought it was fairly marginal as well, and said so. And usually the rules experts are pretty reticent to criticize the officials that are on field at the game. And so when I hear that, I think, reading between the lines, that he didn't agree with that call. So I didn't either, but he did miss a tackle. That was by the right sideline, I believe, on a run that went for a few yards, or it might have been a pass that went for a few yards. It wasn't it's not the end of the world or anything. Roquan is allowed to occasionally miss a tackle. It's just we don't see them very often. So that was unusual. Let's move on and talk about Kyle Hamilton. Tremendous versatility of use in here, but they're getting the most value out of Kyle Hamilton when he's in that big nickel position. When he's playing slot corner and taking away the strong side of the football field, he's been more valuable than he has been at dime, playing that middle linebacker, or will linebacker more specifically, spot next to Roquan. So why would that be true, or why could that be true? Well, when he's on the strong side of the football field, in most NFL formations being 3-by-1, he's opposite a slot receiver with a tight end and a Z on that side. And when he's there, he really has say in 3 types of play, at least, that'll come to that side. He can still rush the passer from that spot very effectively, but he has say on the possibility of, say, a wide receiver screen, in terms of any kind of underneath coverage to that side of the field, where he's very tall and just a looming presence that a quarterback like McCarthy has a lot of trouble throwing over. And we saw McCarthy had a lot of balls batted at the line of scrimmage 4 different times in this game. Kyle Hamilton poses that sort of a threat. And he actually had 2 of the passes defensed in the backfield himself. They weren't that sort of play. They were pass rush attempts where he got too close to McCarthy. McCarthy tried to throw the ball by Hamilton, and he got his hand on it in each case and knocked it down. Unfortunately, we didn't see them try and vectorize him into the flight path of the football where they give him an obvious read to make. He takes it, and Hamilton intercepts the flight path of the football, as we've seen him do to the Browns and Watson. What was it, 23? I guess it might have been 23, might have been early 24. But he lined up off the line of scrimmage. They showed Njoku as wide open on that left sideline. He flew right into the path, tipped the ball to himself like a power forward, making a rebound, and took the ball right into the end zone before anybody even knew what had happened. He kind of walked in at the end of that play. They didn't really have an opportunity to get that kind of play where they got a turnover out of it, but he has a lot of impact on the ball there. And one opportunity to do a little bit more with him is on early downs. If you can line him up a little bit off ball, you can try some of those things. But tackled effectively. He did overrun one play, but Minnesota had no answer for him as a pass rusher, and he rushed the passer 8 times the entire game, had 4 pressure contributions, and 2 of those were combination pressure / PDs. He also had a quarterback hit, so very effective. And it was a little frustrating that they didn't get off the field with those plays necessarily, because the quarterback hit went for a pretty significant gain, I think, and the PDs they might not have ended the drive, or they might have still gone on a score because they were early. Yeah, he had a PD on the very first play of the game, and of course they went on to score a touchdown on that drive anyway. And let me have his second PD. Let me see if I can find that real quick on my score sheet. Oh, this is eluding me at present. He had a quarterback hit, was on the first drive also, so that didn't end up being the type of play. He had a quarterback hit. Now, he had a pressure that led to a quarterback hit by Draymond Jones and a pass defense by Okoye. And I'm trying to find another pressure that was on 3rd and 2 on a drive where they got the Vikings off the field on 4th and 2. All right, I'm not able to find that second PD right now, but very effective game from Kyle Hamilton. Who's right now is Mr. Everything for the Ravens, and certainly the heart and soul of the defense. Humphrey had a difficult game, 2 early errors, including falling down on that 62-yard play to Naylor down the left sideline. Humphrey apparently came out of the game with a finger injury. Now, he was already on the injury report for that this week on Thursday, so I think it probably happened at practice this last week. Sounds like there might be some ligament damage that would require surgery, or he could maybe play through it and stay taped up or however immobilized. But made a nice play on the football in this game to get the interception. Much like what happened to Gilman last week with the 4 missed tackles, but also the strip of the football, you make that trade any day. And in this case, the interception was awfully valuable. I don't know if it's really worth the 62-yard play, because the 62-yard play did result in a score shortly thereafter, got him down to the 4-yard line. He allowed another first down conversion that was shortly thereafter. But anyway, according to Harbaugh in his interview today, Humphrey may need to take 1 week off if he gets surgery, or he may be able to play right through it. He may be able to play with it. So I don't know how this will exactly play out. I don't know if it's a pain management issue that he has to work through. I don't know what they can do with immobilizing it. I will say, back in the 1960s, there was a player, Larry Wilson, a safety who's in the Hall of Fame now, played for the Cardinals, and he played with both arms in casts and had an interception while doing that. Now, we all remember Ray Lewis and the bionic arm he was playing with in the 2012 playoffs, where he missed a big interception chance when it was apparent that it was giving him great difficulty. Can you even imagine a guy with a cast on both arms playing in a football game and having an interception? That is just something to behold. There's probably video of that, by the way, still out there. Larry Wilson is better known in another way. This is, I'll tell a story, risk a story that'll take me a little bit of time, even though it has a very low payoff. And I realize this will not be funny to a lot of people. So there's a book that came out about George Plimpton practicing with the Lions. I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. But anyway, he went to camp with the Lions, and he wrote about his experiences in training camp. And he was a quarterback, supposedly, and they actually put him in for a series of plays in a preseason game that were a complete disaster. But they had him talking, and they actually made a movie about this. And they, I'll have to look up what this is as we go here. But they made a movie, and Alan Alda plays George Plimpton, and George Plimpton Lions. Looking it up right now. Anyway, yeah, in 1963 is when he played, and the book Participatory Journalism. Come on, what's the name of the book here? I got all this other stuff about Sid Finch in here and being a Playboy photographer and things like that. Anyway, he played in these games for the Lions. But one of the things from the movie, Alan Alda is talking about someone who's playing for the Cardinals. And I think it's because they're going to play the Cardinals in the preseason game that he's planning to come up with. And they warned him about Larry Wilson and said that he had 25 sacks the previous year. And first of all, we know that's complete crapola, that nobody's ever had 25 sacks in the history of the National Football League, but certainly not a safety. And there was a guy who was trying to convince me this. The guy's name is Backert. He used to be associated with RSR in some way. And he was trying to convince me that was actually true. And I just, there's no evidence of this. And you look up the 1960, whatever that year was for the Cardinals that they played. I think it's actually the 67 Cardinals that was supposed to have happened, but the 63 that Plimpton went to training camp in Lion, those dates don't really work out. But the Cardinals had 50 sacks in that year, and there's probably evidence that they were effective with some particular type of blitz that might have been very similar to Hamilton coming off the edge and making hay as a pass rusher, but he didn't have 50 sacks. That's for sure. But Paper Lion, that's the name of it. Paper Lion is the name of the book. It's a good book. It's probably worth reading on its own, kind of like Ball 4 from the 1960s. It just gives you a flavor for the game in that day that's worth going through. But anyway, I always consider that, it was funny that they would even go to such an apocryphal statement within the movie. But then to have someone pick up on it that has read the book or watched the movie and liked it and is still willing to claim that, yeah, that's good evidence that, Larry Wilson actually had 25 sacks in a season. We got to be better information deciders than that. With all the crapola that's out on Twitter, if you don't have better information skills and to throw that away, then you're not in a good place. So anyway, that little funny story from the past. Anyway, we talked about Hamilton a little bit. Let's move on. We talked about Humphrey a little bit. Starks, another loose bracket interception in this game, also had another drive-ending tackle, kept himself basically out of trouble on the back end otherwise. So I think another fine game for him and being the right place at the right time. And you look at those three rookies, and you can include Martin as well with that if you want, but they're all ascending right now, all four of them, and they could be players that if you want to figure out what's the reason the Ravens are going to get better and become a legitimate Super Bowl contender, the play of Green, Starks, Buchanan, and possibly even Keon Martin are guys who could help get the Ravens there. So it's been very exciting. Early in the season, I might even said Aeneas Peebles would be in that group. It does not appear that he's going to get the playing time to really have that opportunity, but another guy who looked good at one point this season. This biorhythms, if you remember, there's like a quadruple biorhythm going on that all four of those rookies are playing well at the same time, which has me a little bit giddy. I think that's what I'm going with. John Jenkins in the game had 2 pressures plus a pass defense as a pass rusher. He's been very good at winning his one-on-one matchups as well. Walks the opposing player right back into the quarterback. He's too much, too low, too fast for most opposing offensive linemen, and just has ability to good walk back ability when he's singled up. His only tackle also was a defensive win, and since there weren't a lot of tackles to go around in total. And a lot of them were not wins. The fact that a guy has 1 out of 1 or 3 out of 3, like Travis Jones did, is really impressive. Keon Martin, I mentioned a couple times already, played just 8 snaps on defense. But let's talk about those final 2 drives because he really did something special. A tight trailing coverage of Naylor to force an incomplete in the final minute. This is all on the final drive, by the way. Then he was targeted twice so he's targeted one other time for a 4-yard completion where he made a tackle coming downhill, and that burned off a huge amount of the remaining clock. It might have been like 26 of 69 remaining seconds. That's the order of magnitude at that time. So that 4-yard play was one of the really big plays for the Ravens in that final minute in the final drive where the Minnesota had a 93-yard field they were looking at and had to drive it very quickly. He made a big play. He also made a play tracking down the quarterback, tackled McCarthy, beautiful form tackle after a 7-yard gain. Again, 7 yards, 25, 26 seconds, whatever it was that ran off the clock. Another great exchange of value there for Martin on that play. So great plays from Keon in that final minute. Really knew how to play prevent football and get it done. Last guy I want to talk about is Chidobe Awuzie. Had a fantastic game. Outstanding in relief of Humphrey. He was in before that only on dime snaps as the second outside corner, and then they move Humphrey to the slot on those plays. They move Hamilton to be the dime, or the weak side linebacker on those plays. So that's how they would line up. But after Humphrey got hurt, he took over Humphrey's outside role, and Martin took over the dime nickel role. So that's the way they ran it. Otherwise, when they ran just a standard nickel, it was 100% of the time they played Hamilton in that slot. But anyway, Awuzie, he had the ticky-tack DPI penalty, which is unfortunate. But otherwise, he was basically perfect. 3 targets for 0 yards. Jefferson had an awful game. I haven't looked at it in terms of yards and targets, but they tried to throw him the ball a lot, and they were just unsuccessful doing it. Okay, Jefferson had 12 targets for 37 yards in the game. So he only got 3.1 yards per target for the game. And a lot of that was Awuzie. Some of it was Wiggins also. There were other defenders involved. I'm not saying they're the only two. But for him to be throwing the ball 12 times and only get 37 yards, obviously the Ravens are getting the job done against one of the NFL's premier receiving weapons. The other play that he made that is an off-book play, so to speak, is the 2-point conversion denial. Now, they talked about it a little bit, but Minnesota ran a pick play to get Jefferson space on the outside, and Awuzie was the only one who could deal with it. Thielen basically came into the space where Hamilton was. Hamilton would have been the natural defender for Jefferson as they were lined up at the line of scrimmage, but because Thielen was in there picking him, Hamilton couldn't make the move, but Awuzie did. He got there in time, got up high enough against a player who has some legitimate leaps to him, and knocked the ball away from Jefferson. Very impressive play. And Awuzie, one of the stars of the game. In fact, I'll be mentioning that a little bit later. So a lot of great individual performances from the Ravens defenders in this game. And not everything was perfect by any means. Roquan didn't have that great a game, and Humphrey didn't have that great a game in terms of what he did, but he had a big contribution to one play. But generally speaking, the Ravens defenders did an outstanding job in this game, and in aggregate, they were very effective. I want to get to a few mailbag questions here, then I'll come back and do the MVPs for the game. We got some interesting ones here, and I appreciate it. Any of you, when you do, please use hashtag Filmstudy mailbag on Twitter to send them. I've been getting some by email, and that's fine if you don't have another way to get me a question, but it's ideal if you'll put it out on Twitter, because that's where I usually filter to put the questions directly into my show notes when I'm writing my outline for the show and whatnot. So it'll help if I have them there. Appreciate comments and questions. If you want, just toss a comment out there. Normally there would be a guest on the show and we would kind of discuss the thing, probably, if you make the comment, or just talk about it. Yeah, interesting comment. We think this, we think that. But you don't have to ask a question. We appreciate your comments. Jeff B says, Steams this week, you should definitely talk about what we are seeing so far from Draymond Jones versus what Oweh gave us before the trade. My impression that it's an upgrade, even not counting the game from Gilman, but curious to hear your take. Good point, Jeff. I think you're right. First of all, it's a good idea to talk about Oweh, and we haven't done that yet. They traded away their best pass rusher in Oweh. I think they still miss him in terms of what he brings to the field, and I think he could be, if he were here, the Ravens would be very happy about it. And it's not like they couldn't have gone out and gotten Draymond anyway, or Draymond and a safety by exchanging draft capital to do that. Owe was a high price to pay for Gilman, specifically. Gilman in this game, by the way, is one of the players probably didn't have that great a game, I would say. But the big play that he missed out on was a throw that was high on the left sideline. He had the proper loose bracket coverage, and the ball eluded him, even though it looked like it went right through his hands, honestly, for an interception. He played the ball correctly. He just did not make the catch. And I appreciate the Ravens are taking a lot of shots on goal, but some of them have to be higher chances. When you have a higher chance to make the interception or make a play on the football, you got to make it. So they made 2 out of 3 really good interception opportunities they had in this game. They missed out on some other interception opportunities where they had batted passes and whatnot at the line of scrimmage. None of those ended up falling into the Ravens' hands. And then they got 1 of the 3 fumbles. So this was a high shots on goal and not a particularly impressive results game for the Ravens defensively. They also had 13 passes defense. I have found some errors in that number, but if it were true, it would be the 4th highest total in Ravens history. And those 13 passes defense are probably worth about 2.6 interceptions for a normal team. About 1 every 5 is normal in the NFL. So, they did okay in that, but probably not quite as well as they should have done. And McCarthy definitely sailed the football and helped them out plenty in this game. Getting back to Owe, though, for a second, he's obviously been outstanding for the Chargers in his time there. Not saying he would have done that for the Ravens, but I would say he could be part of the solution to the Ravens' outside linebacker problem. And if they still had Owe, it'd be that much less playing time for Ajabo. It'd be more high-quality playing time for Green. It would be probably high-quality playing time for himself. And he would probably be playing a few more run snaps because they would have to share that burden with the Ravens still lacking the obvious early down run defender they had when they had Tavius Robinson. So we'll look forward to the return of Tavius Robinson. We'll see how that comes to a further evaluation. Were the 2 trades a net positive? That's quite possibly true. I'm of the opinion they probably paid a little bit too much for Owe, and they they didn't get enough back for Owe, I should say. And that they got first results, outstanding value for Draymond Jones. Draymond appears to be a guy who can really help the Ravens, and he put up a number of pressures on the board in his very first game, which is a positive. All right, Jeff B's second question. He says, also worthy of discussion, Hamilton's pass rush. It's one thing for a safety to win occasionally with speed, deception, or stunting, but a safety successful at bullying a right tackle, it's true. He actually bulled the right tackle into the pocket. Now, part of that is Brian O'Neill felt susceptible clearly to any kind of speed that Hamilton could have brought to that process. And so he was trying to square him up and doing what Ronnie Stanley does, which is give ground in order to maintain his mirror. So it wasn't just that Hamilton was bullying him per se on the play, but he was forcing O'Neill to give ground with his combination of length and elusiveness that he was demonstrating to him. And I think that was very nice. Have I ever seen it before? Well, the big time I've seen it before in recent NFL history has been Derwin James as a rookie. Derwin James, a rookie, outstanding pass rusher, just unstoppable. And he's been that way for a period of his career. Jamal Adams had one really big year as a pass rusher. There have been others. I talked about Larry Wilson from the 1960s. I'm sure he had a great year as a pass rusher. He just didn't have 25 sacks. So anyway, various things that we can times it has occurred in the history of the NFL, but he's one of one in a lot of ways. He's a very special player. We may be talking about Nick Emenwari that way. Emenwari has looks like a fast version of Kyle Hamilton, which I'm sure he doesn't have Hamilton's instincts and maybe never will, but he's a similar type of player who can do an awful lot for a defense in terms of being around the line of scrimmage and being very effective. So very special player. Ange Love 85. Thank you for all your contributions, by the way. Ange Love says, hi, Ken, what do you attribute to the emergence of Travis Jones? Is it weakness of the opponent or offensive line, scheme, health, or just getting better in a contract year? Also, should Brian be added to the active roster as he's out of practice squad call-ups and look decent? I actually thought Bryant Bryan had already been added to the active roster, but I would say yes, they probably will add him if they have not done so already. And I'm just looking at the roster right now. Taven Bryan is actually on the 53-man roster now. So that's been done. And yeah, so he's no doubt about that one. That takes care of that. In terms of Jones, there is some weakness of the opponent, but what was really great was the Orr scheming for opportunity for him in this game. I thought that they did a good job of getting him soloed up. They can do multiple. They can do that multiple ways. You can do a simulated pressure where you get extra guys to the line of scrimmage. You can overload, so you have the nose tackle playing on one side of center, on kind of the wrong side of center, if you want to think of it that way, with Jones over the guard and an edge rusher over the tackle. You can generate, a one-on-one opportunity for both your Jones and the edge rusher if you do that typically. And that's one way to get them free. But they have a variety of ways to create opportunities for Travis Jones using stunts or blitzes that would do that. Pretty much all the Ravens did in this game was fairly unsuccessful in terms of stunting and blitzing in this game. So it wasn't, or simulated pressure for that matter. So it wasn't really that was creating net positive opportunities for Jones. Jones got a lot of his pressures when the Ravens were just in a 4-man rush scheme. And he still occasionally would get single teams. And he also made some hay against double teams in this game. So I'd ask you, look at my article that lays out all the plays for Jones, and you'll see it's really a combination of outstanding play for him. All the other things you're mentioning are possibility. He's healthy, by the way. I think that's a big factor. Getting better in a contract year, I don't know. I mean, sure, he's in his 4th year. He's probably getting better. He's got more incentive to get paid, but the guy came to camp looking like an absolute monster this year. He's bigger than I can describe to you in person. And I can't imagine any offensive lineman, even as physically imposing as those players tend to be, really looking at Travis Jones and not being very concerned about how they're going to be able to block him. So anyway, he's done a great job this year. Very exciting. He's one of the players certainly who can carry the Ravens through to a very successful result this season. Minion Hunter, appreciate all your questions. My friend, thanks for chipping in again. How realistic is it that the Ravens induced these false starts? Vrabel denied the Patriots were doing that when their safety was caught actually doing it. Well, I think there is some evidence that the Ravens are inducing some of them, and I think it's a matter of you got a bad combination of a rookie quarterback that does not have great continuity probably with his offensive line, and skill position players that are maybe more jittery than you'd like. It's not like the Ravens have had no problems ever with skill position players who will false start occasionally. They've had it from various tight ends in the past. They've had it from wide receivers in the past. It's not like they've been immune to it, but it seems like the Ravens did do some effective inducing as well. I thought, Kyle Van Noy and Kyle Hamilton both were effective at making movements that might have called false starts. And one of the plays, I thought Wiggins did a good job in combination with Hamilton, them making a move at the same time that caused a flinch out of, I think, Jefferson on that right side of the offensive formation. So, yeah, I think it is realistic that the Ravens had a hand in it. I don't think they did all of it. And I think whatever the Vikings send to the league, what they're going to find is that the Ravens didn't really do anything off book. And they certainly didn't do anything in terms of making calls at the line of scrimmage, which were trying to screw up the cadence. The Ravens have been called for that penalty specifically before. And I mentioned Peter Boulware has been called for multiple delay of game penalties in his career with the Ravens when he would mimic the snap count or potentially maybe just be trash talking with the right tackle or the left tackle prior to the play. And get called for that. So it's not like it never happens. The play was called once on the Ravens last year. I think it was called 7 times across the entire NFL. If you go to NFLpenalties.com or whatever that site is, they have all the calls for it in an entire season. So it's not a call you see every year or anything. You probably see it about once every 5 years or once every 2.5 years in a game involving your team. But it does happen. And I've certainly seen the call before. So, yes, I think it's realistic that they had a hand in this. I almost find it impossible to believe that the Ravens did not have any hand in it in a game where there was 8 in a home game for the Vikings. That's a lot of circumstantial evidence saying that the Ravens probably had a hand in it. Is it? And there's some visual evidence that they definitely had some pre-snap movements that might have had a hand in it. But is it enough that they're culpable of something or will get fined by the league? I don't believe so. I think the most likely thing that'll happen is a rules change that'll be discussed, next time the competition committee gets together during the off season. All right, appreciate all the questions. Let's move on. Talk the MVPs really quickly. I'll go from 3 to 1. My third MVP, and this is a tough choice because he easily could have been higher, and there's also other deserving players, is Chidobe Awuzie. 0 for 3 on targets, did allow a 38-yard DPI. Did also miss a tackle, by the way. On the 62-yard play, he had one of the missed tackles on that left sideline that allowed some additional yards before it was finally run down. And that was unfortunate, but he otherwise made up for it with an outstanding game. No receptions allowed on 3 targets, knocked down the 2-point conversion. By the way, that if they make that math 2-point conversion to go down only 6, and boy, we're seeing more and more teams that are adapting properly to the math of the football game. You have to have a 38.2% chance to make that play in order to make it the play the choice correct to go for a 2-point try there. But I see more and more teams doing it correctly now. And 24 years ago now, Brian Billick in October of 2001 was the only guy to do it in about a 20-year period. So it's a new thing. It's something that the NFL is finally adapting to. And I think it also gives you a little window into just how slow the pace of adaptation of analytics is for the NFL. They'll say a lot about it. They run a big data bowl. They try and hire a bunch of quants, but they don't listen to us. I'm including me as one of them because I like to feel included in this case. I don't work for an NFL team. But as a mathematician, if I did work for an NFL team, I sure as hell would want to be listened to about what's going on in terms of that. But coaches say, well, no, I've got more experience, and they substitute their judgment that is based on other bad decisions that other coaches have made over the years. So it really makes it very difficult to overcome the inertia of changes to basic coaching philosophies. And fortunately, there have been some successful coaches recently who have been very aggressive on 4th down and on 2-point conversions that have changed some of that paradigm. But otherwise, I think that the pace of change has been incredibly slow in terms of the adoption of analytics for football. All right, so Chidobe Awuzie, my number 3 guy. My number 2 guy, Kyle Hamilton, all over the field again. We could probably put Kyle Hamilton in that number 2 spot, and it'd be difficult to argue that I'm wrong almost any week of the entire season, except for the way the games where he's obviously the number 1 choice. Impacted the game as a pass rusher terrifically. Not as much in coverage in this game, but the fact that he didn't give up a lot of receptions also is good. He was in a shallow zone where they threw over him for an 18-yard play. Not really sure he deserved credit for that target, but I looked at the play multiple times and I can understand why PFF scored it that way. It was an in-between play. Typically, I would charge that to the safety who can come down on the play and has a better chance to come down and make at least a tackle to reduce yardage. But PFF goes the other way from most other grading services, and they typically charge it to the underneath player. And so I think I've mentioned this on air before, but Eddie Jackson, before he came to the Ravens, had a 4-year period where he had exactly 100 targets for almost exactly 10 yards per target. And in that same period on Pro Football Reference, they charted him for 144 targets. So the natural tendency they had was to charge more of those between level 2 and level 3 targets to the safety. So anyway, difference in methodology and definition of how you do things doesn't make PFF's value any less. But it's a definition I would probably look at. I usually I'd score my own targets and I assign them as I see fit. And when I differ from PFF, I typically say why. I didn't think that was egregious in terms of the one they charged to Hamilton in this game. Anyway, Hamilton, my number 2 star. My first MVP, the number 1 guy, is Travis Jones. Had his best game as a pro. He is at the heart of the Ravens pass rush. Everything that they have in terms of effectiveness is predicated on how dominant he is in terms of his ability to command doubles, create singles for others, or regularly beat the single teams that he gets a chance to go up against. By the way, in this game on one play, people talk about how players are often double and triple teamed. He was actually triple teamed on a play. And it's funny to see, but the Ravens had 3 men rushing the quarterback, and the Vikings had 7 blocking, and they actually used 3 in the middle on Travis Jones. I will try and find you that play because it's one of the 3-man pass rush plays, and there's only a couple of them. It might be the 4th and 3 play on the first drive of Q4 that it occurred on. It wasn't the last play of the game. Travis Jones wasn't even in there for that. So I think it was the 4th and 3 play at the beginning of Q4. Take a look at it if you want to see a player actually get triple team, because it basically never happens. People talk about it happening, it never happens. So this was a play where 3 linemen, it wasn't just any guys, it was the left tackle, the left guard, and the center all triple teaming Travis Jones on the same play. So it's pretty cool to see. Anyway, he's my number 1 star. And that'll do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. If you have ideas for shorts, hit me up with them. DMs are always open on Twitter. As always, if you can do anything to promote the show, we always appreciate that. 5-star, 50-word review is always highly valued in terms of doing that on whatever your favorite podcast platform is. And you can always listen for me on Tuesday mornings from 8 to 8:30 on 105.7. And I'll tell you what I'd really appreciate there. I would love it if some of the fans of this show would call in with a question while I'm on between 8 and 8:30 on a Tuesday. And I'm not saying that the calls at 105.7 are of a low quality. There's some really nice listeners and some guys who call in fairly regularly. But I'd love to hear an analytic question come up during that time. And we often get, more complaints about Harbaugh or other things that are fairly common, and they've had lots of those calls. So maybe if you have a question that's specific that you think I'd be able to answer, please hit up 105.7 between 8 and 8:30 on a Tuesday morning. Thanks for listening again, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.